Alright, what's up people? This is going to be the formal start to the guide. So first we're going to start off with some of her normals and specials. And in this section I'm going to be highlighting each normal and each special. And I'm also going to be going over kind of their strengths and weaknesses, when you should use them, when you should not use them. All of that is going to be covered here. So let's just get started, shall we? So, first of all, I'm the wrong character. Not bad. So first of all, her 5L. 6 frames minus 3. The main problem with this button is that it's pretty stubby in comparison to the rest of her buttons. So you got to be careful about pressing this in situations where you want to challenge, because a lot of characters have a good way to space out their strings. So if you try to mash 5L in return, you'll get whiff punished. So it's not like Bardock, you know. It's not like Bardock who can press 5L in a lot of situations, and it's long enough range to actually get challenges. You have to be much more careful about how you choose to challenge with this button, and that's part of the reason that her defense is kind of shaky. A lot of the times, whenever it would normally be her turn, this button is too stubby to actually reach. So that definitely is something to keep in mind when playing her. As far as clashes go, she can 4LL, so if you clash with the opponent, you can do 4L, 4L. Unfortunately, after that, she doesn't have great options out of Clash, unless she has, you know, very specific steals. Like Clash Class Barrier is pretty good, but other than that, you usually are going to want to go with Clash Reflect, just so, you know, if you're fighting against a character that has better options out of Clash, you don't have to deal with the kind of guessing game that happens afterwards. Or 5L, or 5LL rather. This advances her a decent amount, but not super far. It's fine in your like normal like stagger, like your normal block string pressure, but not really something you want to be relying on. Like I said, there are definitely way more blessed auto combos than this, so you don't want to just be running around pressing this. But it does reach a little further than people would expect it to. Like it reaches from about this range here, so it can be used, but I wouldn't go around throwing it out any chance you get. So it advances her a slight bit, but overall you want to be relying on some of her M buttons, and we'll be talking about those in a bit from this range. And then her 5LL, it actually is minus 5 on block, which is really nice. So it can't be punished, can be canceled into her moves, to her special moves. So just a pretty standard auto combo. It is very easy to do her vanish extensions with the auto combo, so at least that is something very positive. Pretty easy to just do auto combo relaunch, so that makes some of her combo extensions not that hard to deal with. So definitely work on those and use the auto combo. A lot of her best like relaunch routes from mid screen are going to be involving auto combo to relaunch and continue combos and whatnot. So definitely get acquainted with using it in combos, but in neutral, not so much. Alright, after the auto combo series, we need to talk about 2L, and I have a lot to say about this button. So this button is a 7 frame low that is minus 2, and it goes a pretty good distance as well. So this, a lot of people talk about 21's M buttons, right? Whenever they talk about the character, they always talk about like, oh my god, you know, like her tail is so long, like all these buttons go so far, and they're right, but no one ever talks about this button, which is like one of the craziest stagger tools in the game. Like I said, minus 2, really long range, 7 frame startup. A lot of the time, like whenever I'm done like pressuring my opponent and I want to just like re-stagger, you can't even tell that I'm staggering in a lot of these cases, and like this is very easy to open people up with if you have good movement and you understand the tool. It's so good. Like I cannot talk about this button enough. It is like, in my opinion, her strongest stagger tool. Like this is insane, guys. Like if you're out there and you're playing 21, or you're trying to learn 21 and you want to know what to do in staggers, I'm telling you that this, like moving up, like the micro dash 2L will open a lot of people up. And like I said, it goes a really good amount of, like it has really good range on it too. So like situations where they think that they're safe or they try to hold up back, this will hit them on their jump startup a lot, and then you get full combo. So definitely abuse this button. This button is really good. It is really good. After her 2L, we need to talk about her 5M. So her 5M is 10 frames close up. From max range, it is slower, up to 12 frames. And this is like her primary, I would say, her primary whiff punish tool. So if you want to space your string, right? Like, let's say you want to do a block string and you want to end up spaced from your opponent. If they decide to try to mash afterwards and try to take their turn back, a lot of the time you can just press 5M and whiff punish them, because this still reaches from her standard block string positioning. Like, this will always reach. So there are a lot of times where even myself, I like do a block string, or sometimes I won't even finish the whole block string. Sometimes I'll just end with 5M and then press 5M again, because a lot of people's jabs are their fastest buttons don't have the range to contend with this button, because it goes so incredibly far. You can also use 5M. The hitbox is actually like much bigger than people think it is. So for example, if you do a combo into EX dive kick, you can actually get a side switch by dashing under in 5M, because the hitbox is way bigger than you think it is. You see how it hits like the inside of her tail here? This allows you to side switch pretty easy off of this. And like, it's just an overall great button. Like as you guys know, jump cancelable 5Ms as they usually are. 10 frame startup up close is very, very good. Even 12 frames from this range is extremely good. You do want to be careful about, you know, just throwing it out, because it does have recovery, as the M button should, of course. But if you want to play footsies with your opponent and you want to outplay them and you want to whiff punish them, this button is going to be pretty much your go-to. It's very, very strong. And the best part about it is that let's say you go for a string and your opponent decides to press a button and you whiff punish them, right? Not only do you get an M starter, but her best routes can actually still be done out of 5M 2M instead of 2M 5M, because this sets up perfectly for her rejumps. So it's really, really nice whiff punish tool to have. This is a button that's going to make a lot of people complain, because the range is quite ridiculous. Like, look how far away I'm hitting this from. This is pretty crazy. So once you get a feel for like using this is a button that I've one of the biggest challenges of learning to play this character was transitioning from sometimes challenging with just L buttons to challenging with M buttons, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of us tend to default to pressing, you know, our L buttons because they're the fastest we have, right? We just want to get the hit as fast as we can. But this button, on the other hand, if my opponent's trying to stay spaced, it's really hard for them to space around this giant button. So sometimes whenever I'm being pressured and I notice that my opponent is spaced, sometimes I'll press 5M instead of 5L, because obviously this will not reach. And if this hits them, they explode. So it's very, 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 very good button. One of our best for sure. So definitely get a feel for using this, both in neutral and like I said, in situations where she's being pressured from a decent distance away. The next button is 2M. So a lot of the 21 mains out there are gonna groan whenever I talk about this button, because it used to be better. So it used to hit from round start. Length from here, right? They have nerfed it, but it's still a great button. It's 11 frame startup. It's what I like to call hit scan normal. I know like some of you shooter players out there would be like, oh my god, that's like it's not what it is. But whenever I talk to fighting game players about it, I like to call it a hit scan normal. What I mean by that is it doesn't have travel time. So regardless of whether you're right next to them or the max distance to hit the button, it's always the same amount of frames. And that's a very, very nice characteristic to have. It's always 11 frames no matter what. And it tracks up to a little bit less than round start length away. This button is super, super good. Of course, stomp normals usually are very, very good in fighting games, and this one is no different. And it gives her some of her juiciest damage. So, of course, it's also used in like her standard like block strings and her combos and whatnot. But it has a really nice feature of like, so you see how it like sticks up through the ground. So this normal is way taller than you think it is. So a lot of the time, even if your opponent jumps, if they try to jump over your button, they'll be forced to block because this reaches up high, so they'll be forced to block, and it'll bring them down to the ground. And that is where you'll catch a lot of people holding up, or they're trying to jump. You'll hit them on you either hit them on their jump startup, or they'll jump and they'll block and be forced to the ground, and that'll let you re-stagger and get your pressure starting all over again. And it's a very, very nice tool to have for sure. Arxis, please don't nerf this button again. We really like it. You know, the old one was insane, but we'll take this one. This one's definitely still good. The next button to talk about is 3M. So unlike Kid Buu, she doesn't have a 1M. She only has a 2M and a 3M. And the 3M is also a hit scan normal. It is always 17 frames, no matter where you hit the opponent from. It tracks to just about full screen. As you can see, I'm still hitting my opponent from all the way out here. So if you're all the way full screen, it will whiff. This is the max range right here, so you guys can get a feel for it. Now, this tool is very, very important because what happens is whenever you're playing neutral with this character, a lot of people choose to want to jump, right? Because she has very, very strong Ki Blast game with 2S and projectiles in general. So a lot of people will block a 2S and then they'll try to jump. Well, you can actually check them by 2S'ing and then doing dash up 3M. And a lot of the time, you'll actually hit their jump startup. So this button is a very, very good tool to force your opponent either into the air or hit them on their jump startup. So it does have a dead zone. It does have a weakness. I'll be going over some setups with 3M. There's actually some very, very cool, like almost full screen Oki setups you can do with 3M. But we'll get to that in the advanced setups section. I do want to make a note about 3M's dead zone. So whereas it does hit almost full screen, it does have a dead zone here. So this makes it very important for if you're doing a block string, right? If you're doing a block string with 21, you want to be very, very careful that you want to make sure you press 2M instead of 3M. Because if you're doing a block string very close up and you go for 3M, instead you will drop your combo or you will whiff in front of your opponent's face. And as you can see, it is minus 42 on whiff. So you do not want to be whiffing this button in your opponent's face. So make sure that whenever you're doing your strings and your combos, that you're transitioning into 2M instead of 3M, because this will get you killed, I promise you. Alright, hi guys. The next button I want to be talking about here is her 5H. So her 5H is a very long range chop that advances her quite a lot. Like as you can see, like she moves quite far here. So it's 15 frames start up close, and then it is like at max range, I believe it's 18 frames. But it varies depending on just how long range you're getting with it. The main use of this tool is an anti-reflect tool. So if you think your opponent's going to reflect, you can 5L 5H, and as you can see, they are forced to block afterwards. And not only that, the best part about it is that if you hit a raw 5H, it's very easy to confirm into her rejump combos like so. So 5H is a really, really important starter for 21 because she gets a ton of damage off of it. And like I said, it is one of her primary anti-reflect tools. And there are even times where even on defense, I will reflect something, and then sometimes I press 5H because they don't ever expect it to reach quite this far. So it is also used in a lot of her advanced routes in the corner as well. So we'll go over that a little bit later. But overall, pretty solid button. Don't want to be, you know, throwing it out willy-nilly and like whiffing it, but this button is very, very important for her. And make sure you tune up those rejumps, you know what I mean? Make sure you practice those because you're going to be hitting a lot of 5Hs. It's at the point where like a lot of the combos that I go for are no longer 2H combos. Like I think a lot of 21s when they start up, they go for routes like this. And then eventually, whenever you want to get more advanced, you start transitioning into these routes because this gives you more corner carry, more damage, and it's overall better for her. So 5H, we thank 5H for being around. The next button we want to talk about here is her 2H. And I've heard a lot of people complain about this character, especially people that are like pretty new to the game or not that advanced at the game yet. And one thing that they always talk about is how crazy this character's 2H is. It is a pretty huge button. It is very, very large. The hitbox is pretty insane. So if you're dancing around in the air, a lot of the time you don't really want to mess with this button. This is not a good time. You will get smoked if you try to challenge this button in a lot of situations. But let's talk more about kind of the more advanced things involving this. So one of the most important things to know whenever you're talking about a 2H is, does she have safe cancels if your opponent blocks the 2H, right? Because sometimes you'll go for a 2H and you think you got the anti-air, but you don't. So you're like, okay, how do I cancel the safeties? Well, there's a few different things to note here. So first of all, if you do 2H into L dive, it does jail. This jails if you do it immediately. So there's some important things to note here. First of all, if you're in a situation where you're trying to anti-air your opponent and it turns out they land and block, you are not going to be doing this frame 1, right? You're pretty much only going to be doing this frame 1 if it is a block string that you have already, you know, committed to doing. So as you can see, if I do a little bit of a delay, if I 2H and then I'm like, oh wait, he blocked it, let me cancel into dive, I will get 2H myself. And this is very important. So her safest cancel out of 2H, since it does leave her airborne, is actually 214S. So I'll show you here. So as you can see, if I do 2H and then I'm like, oh, I want to dive. Well, there I got the counter hit, of course. You get 2H'd. But if you do 214S, right, it actually gets you out. And even with a significant delay. So I 2H, wait, I'm out. And this works even against some of the 2H's in the game that hit both sides. So it depends on the delay, of course, but it can work even against like Gotenks 2H. So as you can see, his will whiff if he does not wait very, very long. And some characters just can't 2H this at all. They have to punish in another way. Now this does have landing recovery, the 214S. So they could technically punish your landing, but in the heat of the moment, whenever when you land a 2H on block, a lot of the time your opponent is not thinking about like, oh, let me chase her landing. They're just thinking, let me get the hit now. And a lot of people will match 2H and they will whiff, and that allows you to punish or you to pressure. So overall, the command grab is much safer, definitely a lot safer to go for than the dive, but the dive can work sometimes. Sometimes they'll try to challenge with like an L button or M button or something like that, and they'll get counter hit by the dive. That does happen, but in my opinion, it is much less reliable than just doing the command grab. Other than that, she doesn't really have great options outside of the steals or the command grab. There are some other options that are pretty steal specific. So like, of course, here I'll show you guys really quick. We need the air one. Okay, so if I do something like this, right, then this could bait my opponent, but that's very, very specific. You need to have, you need to have the right matchup. You need to have it in the slot. But this can definitely catch people off guard. But that'll come into play later on whenever we talk about some more steel specific. Let's move on with more for normals and specials. So let's talk about her Ki Blast. So next we're going to be talking about her 5S. I'm going to make Gotenks stop 2H in here just because. So even though it looks like it's multiple Ki Blasts, it is only one. It's only one Ki Blast. And it's 13 frame startup from up close, -4 on block, and as you get further, of course, it's going to be more and more startup. This is just a pretty standard Ki Blast. She only gets one though, so a lot of the time in neutral, you're not going to want to rely on this tool, just because she only has one. If she had rapid fire Ki Blast, Arxis please, this would be a much more reliable tool to go for, but since she only has one, you don't want to really be spamming this. You want to be spamming the next the next one that we're going to be going over here. And when I say spamming, I don't mean that literally, all right? I know some of you YouTube commenters are going to be like, you know, Khalil said spam this next one. So I just go into matches and spam. I don't actually mean that. I just mean that this next button, which is 2S, is much more reliable. And there's a lot of things to talk about with this. So this, in my opinion, is their strongest neutral tool. It fans out, covers a lot of the screen. It'll snuff out assist calls as well. Like if your opponent calls their assist and you press 2S, they will, more often than not, their assist will get hit by the 2S and just will be on cooldown, which is very, very good for us and bad for them. It also allows you to set up for a few different option selects. So I'll show you guys what those look like. So from full screen, depending on which steel you have, so these are all steel. These are all steel option selects out of 2S. So the best one is if you have sticky command grab, the yellow command grab as we call it, and your opponent decides to super dash at you while you are throwing a 2S. You can option select into the command grab steel and get a full combo. So what this looks like, I'll show you guys my inputs. So what I'm doing here is I'm pressing 2S. And from full screen, I'm pressing 214S no matter what. Because even if they block, you see how it doesn't come out the first time? Because the key blasts haven't made contact with my opponent yet, so I can't cancel into the command grab. But since they super dash at me, they activate the cancel property, and that allows me to scoop them. If you don't miss, like that. This is her strongest option select out of 2S. A lot of the time, you can fall back and you can throw this, and people will get really antsy. They're like, oh my god, I'm sick of her shooting me. I want to super dash. And this tool is really, really strong. It has such low recovery that a lot of the time, even if your opponent reacts and super dashes at you, you'll actually be able to block. But it depends, of course, how early they decide to super dash. So like here, you can see I land in time. Or if I'm from full screen, right, you can even throw and have time to 2H, depending on your spacing and how early your opponent decides to super dash at you. So you can see, like, if I'm ready for it, I can either block, or if I'm feeling froggy, I can 2H. Or you could even reflect, of course, because it's rank 1. And this is what makes it such a strong tool. The very, very low recovery allows her to play like a very non-committal neutral that kind of counters a lot of things in the game. A lot of characters' key blasts will get hit by this because it goes over top of them. Like I said, it snuffs out a lot of assist calls, and even if they decide to commit with a super dash, you can block an overwhelming majority of the time. You also maintain your air actions. So what I mean by that is, so let's say you do a block string and you throw 2S. Well, it actually recovers early enough that you can air dash out of it. And this is going to be very, very important for kind of wanting to steal turns, right? This is a very, very strong tool, especially if they don't reflect the 2S. You can air dash in, steal a turn, restart your pressure, and this will make people feel like they can't do anything. Now you do want to be careful because there are responses to this, and I see a lot of 21s throwing this out without really thinking about the implications. There are ways to counter this. I know it's not unbeatable. I wish it was unbeatable, but it's not. But yeah, maintaining her air actions makes this very, very strong, and this is what makes 2S like such a strong tool in neutral. There are so many things you can do with it. You maintain your air action, you can OS out of it. It makes this the go-to option whenever you're like more than half screen away. A lot of the time. Now, people that know the matchup will recognize that you want to throw this, and you know, sometimes they'll try to do things that throw you off your rhythm, but this is much less committal than, say, spamming 5S, or please, this is not that good. You don't want to be really pressing this. This has way more recovery. Overall, you want to, if there's any time that you want to be throwing this, you would rather throw this. Moves her backwards, has OSs, able to block afterwards, much, much better than relying on JS overall. So keep that in mind whenever you guys are playing the neutral character. Alright, let's talk about some of her aerials. So JL, this button is good and bad. So on the bright side, it has a very high hitbox. Like as you can see, she kind of reaches up and jabs. So what it's bad for is a lot of the time whenever you're going for like IED pressure, or like let's say you're trying to jab a super dash and they come from like under you, this will just whiff because the hitbox is very high up. Like as you can see, like you have to do it really late to get it to make contact, right? However, it does have the benefit of since it reaches so high, that allows you to bring people to the ground much easier. So if someone is above you and they're jumping, well, let's say someone's just jumping, this button is pretty good for just being like, okay, well now I'm in because I have this button that reaches for the sky. Other than that, pretty standard button. Like I said, you want to make sure to play around it whiffing on crouching opponents or on small opponents in general. Most of the time, whenever I go to air with people, it isn't with JL, though I do it sometimes. But most of the time when I go to air, it would be with this button, JM, which is super good. 10 frames, really long range. You can hit confirm with J2H. Usually, most of the time you can. There are times, like I'll show you guys, when it's at the end of its range, it's at the very tip of its range. Let's see if I can get it here. See how J2H whiffs? So you want to be very mindful of the range that you started your combo with, because this button is actually so long range that her J2H will actually whiff in certain situations. So if this happens, what I like to do is to either, from max range, either knock them down into an assist, like so, or you could always take a vanish combo as well. I had to steal in that slot, but under normal circumstances, it would be a command grab. You guys get the point. So, like I said, this all goes hand in hand with understanding the effective ranges of her buttons, and this one is one that is important to understand because you're going to be challenging and trying to air a lot with this button, and you don't want to hit someone with JM and then whiff a J2H afterwards, because then you're going to feel really bad and get punished. Alright, the next button we're going to be talking about is her JH, which is kind of this pinwheel-like move that we see here. So, the reason that I picked up 21, and a lot of people don't know this, but the reason I picked up 21 is because she reminded me of Juri from Street Fighter 4, who was my main. And one of the coolest things that Juri had is she had a jumping, neutral jumping roundhouse that hit both sides. And this is the same way. This hits in the front and the back, but there are some caveats to it. So, if you do it from like a typical IED, it will whiff on the other side of your opponent. Don't mind whatever that was. I don't really know what I did there, but as you can see, it doesn't work under normal circumstances from these ranges. So you don't really want to be pressing IED JH like this, unless it's a super jump IED. Because if it's a super jump IED, then she will turn around and you'll be able to hit your opponent more effectively, like so. And this is very important for her Oki, which I'll cover later on. But this button is very good because, like I said, you don't have to worry about which side it ends up on, and it has the benefit of not. So this is a benefit and a drawback. So first of all, if you get a smash animation, as you can see, it doesn't knock them down. It doesn't give you, sliding knockdown. It doesn't give you the smash animation, but it can be used for extended combos, both in the corner and mid-screen. But if you try to use it mid-screen, so let's say you try to do it from a normal combo, right? Like this. You notice how that whiffs. So it only works mid-screen if you have dash momentum. And we're lucky enough that our re-jump route will give us dash momentum. And you might think, oh, that only works because you got to the corner, but I'll show you with my back to the corner. See how I was able to link JH into J2H? That will only work mid-screen whenever you have dash momentum. But it helps her maximize her damage a lot. So we're very, very thankful for this button. And I'll cover how to use it for Oki situations later on in the Oki and setup sections. We'll move right on here. All right, so we're gonna move on to some of her specials. First of all, her 236S, which is her fireball. So the L version of the fireball, turn on guard here. So it is 18 frame startup, which is pretty fast for a beam-like, projectile. It is beam-like, it is not a beam. As you can see, there's a lot of space there. So it's easier to avoid than a beam, but it does have the benefit of like I said, being very, very fast. And this also carries over to her assist. Her A assist got buffed really hard in Season 3. It now has more hit stun. It comes out faster. Overall, much, much better assist than it was in Season 2. And it was already good in Season 2. So this you mostly don't want to be throwing out in neutral. Just because it is essentially a beam where if you throw it out and your opponent avoids it, it can be easily punished because specials cannot be vanish canceled and whatnot. So don't want to be relying on this too much in neutral, but you can throw it out every now and then to check your opponent. There's no problem with that. Interestingly enough, the M version is actually -4 on block, and it pushes you a decent amount away. The drawback to this is that it whiffs on crouchers, so it's not really reliable as a block string ender, because a lot of the time your opponent will default to crouch blocking, and then this will whiff, and then you'll be very, very sad because you will get punished. But it is interesting that the anti-air version of the fireball does actually end up -4 on block. It's pretty interesting. Wouldn't think, but here we are. I don't make the rules. And now we get to talk about some of the juicy stuff. So EX Fireball, I'm gonna take away the steal that I have to show you guys first. So with no steals, EX Fireball is the same startup as L Fireball. It is 18 frame startup, and it is +1 on block. And this is a very important change because in Season 2, EX Fireball with no steals was -2 on block. They have changed it to now be +1. This is very, very important. That means we get plus frames even with no steals. And the frame advantage of this goes up with depending on how many steals you have. So if I have 1 steal, instead of being +1, I am now +5, and it goes up by 5. The advantage goes up by 5 frames every time you get an extra steal. So as you can see with 2, I'm now +10, and then +15 and +20. Now, why is this important? It's because now that we get a full stock of steals off of her grounded level 3, the situation where we have a full stock of steals is now very common. This post level 3 situation is very scary for the opponent. They have to block some of the best level 3 Oki in the game, and then they have to deal with this giant fireball that is +20 on block. It actually has super durability. It will clash with level 1 supers as long as you have at least 1 steal. It's a very, very interesting tool that she has. Now, they did change in Season 3. You can no longer jail into it. We used to be able to do a standard block string. I'll show you guys guard first only. So we used to be able to do a standard block string into 5H, into EX ball, and that would jail. Now, because of they made it, the steals much more accessible now in the form of level 3. They have now made it so we have no way to jail into this without assists, unfortunately. But it can definitely be something worth spending your assist on. So you can see with Bardock here, I still get the +20, and this jump in will not be anti-airable because of how many plus frames I have. All of the versions of Fireball do jail into Vanish. They all jail into Vanish, which is a very, very important tool solo. Like if you're trying to make a comeback and you make your opponent block a fireball, you can take your turn. But she doesn't have a way to jail into any of her fireballs without assists, which is unfortunate. But this tool is still extremely strong. Definitely make sure to abuse this, especially now that EX moves are half a bar. You want to be going into this plus frame more often than not whenever you have steals. You're gonna have to weigh the risk reward depending on the matchups that you're playing, but this tool very, very strong. Please be sure to not sleep on this This is very, very, very good. Okay, so the next we're going to be talking about is our dive. So all of her dive versions are -5 on block. It does not matter which one. All of them are -5. L, M, and then EX. So the difference is that the L version starts up faster, right? You can see 12 frames versus 15 frames. And the M version does a little bit further of a hop. So what this means is that in certain situations, if against a crouching opponent, the dive can actually go behind your opponent. And that can lead to some very, very interesting situations, to say the least. Most of the time, whenever you're doing combos, you will want to be ending in M dive. M dive is the easiest to extend with. So let's say you haven't spent your smash yet, you decide to go into M dive. It's easy to call your assist, to do the combo. Very, very easy. L dive can do the same, but it has less time and it does less damage as well. I will say that at the end of very, very long combos, you're going to want to switch to L dive, because at the end of the HSD timer, whenever, you know, hit stun decay is a very, very big thing at the end of long combos, M dive will whiff, whereas L dive does not whiff. It'll actually still make contact with your opponent. So you want to make sure that you understand when to use what dive. Like I said, most of the time you're going to be using M dive. And the air versions have different startup as well. So this one's 16. But like you see how it's harder to finesse with this one because she kind of does the little pullback, whereas this one is faster. The little hop makes it kind of hard to work around sometimes whenever you're doing M dive, but it can be good for like floating around your opponent and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna dive call assist. This is very strong naturally if you can force your opponent to stay grounded during it. But most of the time you're gonna want to be pressing M dive. So L dive is very good. EX on the other hand, if you haven't used your smash, gives you like this crazy ground bounce state that you can even Dragon Rush grounded out of. You can side switch off of this as well, depending. You have to run for it here. Yep. Or you can just, you know, continue the combo yourself. It all depends on what you want to do at the time. But this can be very useful, especially out of like super dash confirms. So like my typical super dash confirm with no assist looks something like this, right? Because I don't have any assist to work with, so this is a very, very good thing to have in your arsenal. That's most of the time when you're going to be using EX dive. There are some other applications, and all of these dives can be done out of her command grabs, by the way. So let's say you haven't spent a smash. Let me empty my slots. Let's say you go for a command grab. The smash state from all of the dives applies post steal as well. So L dive will side switch, go behind. M dive, stay in front. And then EX, if you haven't spent your smash, gives you that same float state into the combo that we talked about before. So you really, really have to be careful and keep track of like when you've used your smash and when you haven't used your smash. Even though she doesn't have traditional combo structure with, you know, with a knockdown JH, it's still very, very important to keep track of these things, mostly because of the way these dives work whenever they're smash and non-smash. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about are, and this is what you guys probably are waiting for, we're going to be talking about our command grabs. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. First of all, we're going to talk about the grounded 236S, which was buffed in Season 3. It used to be 27 frames. Now it is 24. And do you guys happen to know what else is 24 frames? Oh yeah, this wonderful thing that people like to throw out quite a lot online, 6M. So this command grab became even scarier. So it does have an audio cue with whenever she does it. She kind of yells out a little bit, but now that they've made it faster, it is very, very hard to respond to, and it has very long range as well. Like as you can see, this grabs people from very far away. So a lot of the time, if you're doing like a space string and then you do command grab, they'll never see it coming because it just goes so incredibly far. You can of course like can jump it, of course. They can always jump it. And the best players know when to respond to the audio. But since this character's stagger game is so strong, she really overloads your stack, so it makes this command grab even scarier, because they're so worried about, like, you know, you doing godlike staggers with 2L like we talked before, or like pressing one of these super long buttons that they just want to block because they're afraid of being outranged, and then you hit them with this crazy command grab from downtown, and then they get really upset. So definitely be sure to work in the command grab into your pressure. Don't be too obvious with it. One of the most obvious things that a lot of 21s do is they wait until they've exhausted all of their options and then they command grab. And what I mean by that is, let's say you go for a block string, spent your mediums, you spent your heavies, you even spent your key blast. A lot of 21s are waiting until all of that is said and done to do this command grab. And if your opponent recognizes the resources that you have, it'll be very easy for them to respond to it because they know that you've spent pretty much all of your buttons at that point. But if you learn to work it in and make them really scared of like 5L command grab or even 5M command grab, you know, anything like this, single hits. Sometimes I like to do double hits, like just work it in. They think that they have to block the whole string, but they get grabbed. Very strong, and you want to work that into your pressure a lot. Air 236S is a little bit different. So it's 13 frame startup. It doesn't have anti-air property, contrary to popular belief. This does not have anti-air property, so she can be stuffed out of it by air buttons quite a lot. It is fast, and it being fast makes it very good ender for a lot of her like really long air combos, because since it's so fast, a lot of the time it'll just work. It'll just work as an ender. You know, there are not very many situations where you're doing a combo where air 236S will not work as an ender. And then of course her anti-air command grab. So this one, 214S. 16 frame startup. This one has anti-air property. Unfortunately, due to the way that, you know, command grabs work in Dragon Ball FighterZ, if you try to do it to a super dash, a lot of the time you'll just whiff. So you don't really want to be using it for that purpose, but it can be used to call out people in neutral jumping. Now, it is a commitment though. You got to be very careful. There are some times where I call someone out and they think they're going to jump, and I'll just be like, okay, I'm going to grab you, you know, not missing like I am now. But if you whiff, you gotta be careful because you will be punished. You can be punished. But one thing that is really cool to note about her command grabs is that she maintains her air action afterwards. So she can do air dashes afterward. Now, unfortunately, these command grabs do have landing recovery. So you might be thinking, like, you know, I want to go for a mix like this where I do command grab. It's not that great because the high option comes so much earlier than the low option, and it enables people to OS guard against it very well because she has landing recovery. So overall, you usually don't want to be going for it. You can throw it in every now and then, but it's not great. It's not great anymore, unfortunately. And then last but not least is our J214S, which is a little bit faster. I believe this one is 13 frames as well. Yeah, another 13 frame. And like, honestly, this might be the most valuable slot. So each of her steals give her a each of her command grabs rather give her a steal, a stolen special move that she occupies a slot. So as you can see in the bottom left hand corner of the screen, I'm gonna make him stop jumping because it's really annoying. So I have this yellow steal in my slot. That is for J214S, and this one is super important because J214S is the one that allows us to do all of those cool option selects that I talked about earlier. So arguably, this is the most important steal slot for the character. I would argue that this is by far the most important steal slot for the character. So a lot of the time, whenever I want to end combos, I choose to end with J214S instead of J236S. Now, of course, that all comes down to preference. Maybe you're a player that likes to use some of the other stuff more often, but you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what you have in what slot. So the way it goes is that the furthest left is 236S, and then after that is J236S, and then we have 214S, and then we have J214S. So when you're doing combos, you want to be very, very careful that you don't try to do a command grab when you have a steal in the slot. The reason being is because a lot of the time your combos will drop if you're not ready for it. Some people will do an air combo, right? I'll show you guys what I'm talking about here. So let's say I go to do an air combo and I want to end. I have to make him not block. Crazy, right? So let's say I go to do an air combo and I try to end with this. Well, the cancel window for you to do a dive after a steal, right, is pretty small. So if you're not aware that this will not end in a command grab and it will end in a steal, a lot of the time you'll just drop your combo because you weren't prepared. Now you can continue combo, like for example, if I press it and then I press a dive button, I do continue my combo, but you want to be very, very mindful of what you have in what slot. Because this is going to be very, very important not only to your combo structure, but for how you play the neutral. An Android 21 that has the, you know, the sticky command grab in the J214S slot is much scarier than one without it, because it pretty much makes her a force to be reckoned with in the air. It's a frame one invul move, so you can't really challenge it in a lot of situations. So let's talk about the steals.